Well, welcome back to another episode of the Ownership Advantage, and this is the Coach's Corner installment. And today I'm sitting down with one of our newest coaches on the team, Doug Barra, who is a senior coach, been a part of this ActionCOACH world for a very long time. We're so excited to have him on the team. But Doug, since you're kind of new to the team, newer to obviously the podcast, things like that, give us a little, give the viewers, give the audience a little bit of a snapshot of your background and kind of what's got you to this point of where we're working together and serving two markets now when it comes to the business owners that we get to take care of.
Absolutely. So just a little bit about me, quick background. My education is in software engineering. I was a software engineer for 25 years. And inside of that time, I was both an independent contractor with my own business, and I worked in corporate. I also led teams in corporate. And then 3 days before my wedding with my ex-wife, unfortunately ex-wife, I got laid off. And we decided that we would go into business doing custom programming. That was what I knew. But that business didn't work out too well. And that's in the process of that and trying to make that business work is how we got introduced to ActionCOACH. And that was 20 years ago. So I've now been coaching business owners for the last 20 years inside of ActionCOACH. It's something I absolutely love doing. And people often say, well, how did you go from being, a software engineer to a coach? That's so different. Like, well, it is very different. And it was a whole world of learning. But what I learned to begin with was the business that I had was not sustainable. And when I learned that, was when I was like, oh, people don't really understand what it takes to build a business and to run a business. And that's when kind of the light bulb went off for me to be, you know what, I think this business coaching is something that I would love to do because it allows me to make a difference. And I, even though, I used to hide behind a computer, I love being with people. Not a big party person, but I love being with people and meeting people, and I love making a difference for people. I say to people all the time, what could be better? I get up every day and I help people be successful, and I get paid for it. What could be better than that?
So agree with that. And you've been doing this for 20 years. You've got such great experience in terms of getting client results and things like that. So if you're watching, you're listening to this later on, if you want to see some of the testimonials, some of the results that Doug has gotten for his clients, check out our website, have a conversation with him. Like, it's just incredible to see some of those things. But with all of that wealth of experience here, we were chatting just before we jumped on the recording bit of this, talking about some things that have been popping up in some of the coaching sessions over the past couple of weeks or so. And one of the things that you had mentioned was marketing. And, should it be this type of marketing? Should it be that type of marketing? Especially, today's a digital world. There's a lot of things that can, the whole bright, shiny object syndrome is kind of the way I tend to look at it. But what are you seeing out there? What are some of the clients going through when it comes to marketing? How are they thinking about it? And, what advice do you have as a coach going through that process and where to take them to see a little bit of success?
Yeah, and it's always interesting for me whenever we start to talk about marketing, because marketing always comes up. People are always interested, well, how do I bring in more clients? It's almost 100% that the first thing they ask me is, well, should I do this particular marketing strategy? A lot of times lately it might be something to do with AI, right? Should I invest in somebody to help me get found through AI? should I invest in Facebook marketing? Should I invest in Twitter marketing? Whatever, right? And, I'm always like, they don't understand because I'm looking at them like, well, why are you asking me that? And they're like, well, because, so-and-so recommended it. And I'm like, but who are you trying to talk to? Have you actually sat down and figured out who it is that you're trying to reach with any kind of advertising? Because let me tell you, you can invest a lot of money in advertising that goes nowhere because you're not trying to reach the right people, right? The very first place I always take my clients is, who are you trying to reach? Who's the most important person for you to talk to? Right? And, the second piece of that is it's not only one, right? There's multiple target markets. And I always love that word, target market, right? It's like, no, who is it that you want to talk to? Who are the people that you want to talk to? And that's not just one. And if your marketing doesn't appeal to that person or that group of people, it doesn't matter what marketing strategy you use, it's not going to work. And I mean, my favorite way of putting it is, okay, if I want to sell skateboards, right? And I could go and I could create the most fabulous marketing piece for skateboards, but if I'm trying to do it in a retirement community, I'm probably not going to sell many. Right? However, if I'm going to the skateboard park, even if my marketing isn't great, I'm probably going to sell some because I'm talking to the right people. And if my marketing is excellent, then I'm going to sell a lot.
Yeah. Right people in the right place, right environment. You translate this to some of the digital things out there, and I'd love to touch on that whole I want to be found by AI piece, but we'll put a pin in that one and come back to it. But that
could be a whole course in itself.
that is very true. But this idea that not only do you have to figure out who's best to talk to, right? There's degrees to this, but where do you find them in the highest concentrations, and where are they the hungriest? Right. I was actually just doing a bit of an exercise on this, and I'd love kind of your thoughts and feedback. I was thinking through, in the professional world space, being in, the business coaching side of things, you can think accountants, attorneys, you start thinking like all the different professional services, and LinkedIn is like the place. We're going to go to LinkedIn. Like that's really fascinating. And not that there's anything wrong with it, but when I actually survey the people that tend to be our audience, tend to be our clients, I ask them, okay, so if you're going to go grab your phone and you're going to pop open a social platform, what's the first one you go to? And what's the second? And what's the third? And almost always LinkedIn is like third or fourth on the list. And I ask them, why do you go to LinkedIn? And it's because they're searching for people to essentially sell to. It's like, so they're not in a buying mindset. They're not hungry at that point for solving a problem, other than unless you're, selling services that help them sell more stuff, in which case they're pretty hungry at that point. But it was fascinating, and not to say that that's a blanket statement for everyone, but if you can find the place that they spend the vast majority of their time, and like when they actually make purchasing decisions, that's going to be a much more fruitful way than just, I have to be on Facebook because everybody tells me it's Facebook, or I have to be on TikTok because everybody tells me it's TikTok. It's like, okay, well, who's on TikTok? Who's on Facebook? And how are they using it? And when are they using it? It's a very different animal. And I recognize that's just like one chunk of it. But I think it goes right to what you're
absolutely. And it's kind of funny. This morning I was talking to somebody, and before I had that conversation, I had this kind of thought, right? It was just kind of one of these things that popped into my head. And it was like, a lot of times when you're looking for something, right? And, here in Miami, right, one of the things that we get concerned about this time of year is hurricanes. And, so people are concerned about hurricanes. So you might be thinking, well, what do I have to do to make sure my house is safe for hurricanes? And somebody will come up to you and say, well, what you need is hurricane windows. You need hurricane impact windows. That's going to keep your house safe. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, yeah, but what if you don't have your roof strapped down properly? Right? Then those hurricane windows are going to end up in the yard because your roof came off. They're not going to provide anything there. And it's kind of the same thing in business, right? And in marketing, right? If I don't do all the work to come up to the point where I can say, yes, the people that I want to talk to are looking for what I'm selling on this platform, then it makes no sense to go and do work on that platform, right? Because I don't even know what they're looking for yet. Right? And the same thing is true just in every aspect of business, right? If I'm going to build a house, right, I'm not just going to focus on the windows in the house. I'm going to focus on the foundation first. Right? If I'm going to build my business, I'm not going to focus on the marketing first. I need to focus on the foundation first.
Yeah. There's so much in that I think is just like, I don't know if it's misunderstood. I want to go after the things that seem to be popular, because marketing is a very visual thing. So it's easy to talk about, but nobody wants to talk about the numbers. And I know you're a guy like I am. You like the numbers and get into the spreadsheets, but you had mentioned earlier the understanding how everything works together. So, going back to that little pin that I put in on the, being found in AI, by AI search and things like that. Not that it's necessarily bad, but let's take a step back here, and all the individuals out there that have said, well, I need to be able to be found, SEO for years, need to be found on SEO. I'm like, okay, great. Now you want to move over to this AEO, you want to move into the AI search, things like that. How many people found you on SEO? How many clients or businesses or patients or customers found you that way in the past? And for certain cohorts or types of business, the answer was almost always zero. It's like, okay, so you took 1.5 years to work on SEO to never get anything with it, because at the end of the day, even if it did work, your conversion mechanism on the destination place didn't work, and you had no way to capture and follow up with people. So taking this all the way to its extreme and like understanding how things work together, or wanting to work on one piece versus the other, how do we know where the real problem is? Like, if I 10x your lead flow tomorrow, what breaks? Can you even, do you even have the ability to communicate with all the 10x lead flow? If you have that many coming in, what's your sales process? Does it break down there? Does your conversion rate go from I have 100% conversion rate? Yeah, because you had one sale that you made and you had one person you talked to. If you had 100 of them, what happens next? Is it repeatable? And then, in the back end, are you churning through customers and clients? And, there's so much more to it than just saying, well, I want more lead flow. Okay, well, you can market yourself right out of business if you don't know what you're doing on the rest of the side, right?
Exactly. And it's funny that you said that, because that was what was going through my mind is, I know enough number of businesses that if I 10x their lead flow, I would put them out of business without a doubt. Absolutely. Because financially, they can't handle that big of a jump in growth. But they would have to know that, and so often you get the people that are like, well, I don't care about the numbers. I just get the numbers from my accountant at the end of the year. And, I look at the bottom line, and if I made money, I go celebrate. Or if I look down at that bottom line and I lost money, I go get a drink to commiserate. No. You have to know beforehand, right? The numbers are important. Right? I'd almost say the numbers are sexy, but most people don't believe that. Right? But if you don't know your numbers, you are in for some rude awakenings when you start trying to scale.
It's crazy. I mean, you go back to, I know you and I were trained much the same way. Part of it, what Brad Sugars has taught us is like, the language of business is numbers, right? We understand that, like, that in order to understand what's actually happening, it is the numbers. Now you can break those down into marketing, into sales, into client or customer interactions. Like it's not just the financial piece, but if you don't know the financial bits, it'd be really scary. And I think back to last year, I had a manufacturing client, and he hit some record sales numbers, like starting to really grow the business. It was fantastic. Those record months almost killed him because he had to finance so much stuff on the front end before he finally got paid, and finally getting a handle on what's the cash flow cycle here. And it was in one of those situations where just because we got more business and it looks good on paper doesn't mean that it turned into anything. Like it exposed a ton of things that we got to go work on in the business. And, fortunately the much different situation today, but it's an example that isn't just the professional services side of things where it's like, okay, you can kind of wrap your head around this. Like manufacturing is not going away. It's an industry that's huge right now. And if you don't understand those cash flow cycles, if you don't understand how everything connects together, like it can get really scary, especially if you want to go for growth.
Yeah. And, growth sucks cash. It always does. And if you're not prepared for that, right? And, you were saying, why do people focus on bringing in more business? Because they want more money, right? That's ultimately what a business owner is looking for. They're going, I want more money. I want more cash. But they don't always understand that, more business doesn't necessarily mean more cash. As a matter of fact, like you just were talking about, if you're in retail or if you're in manufacturing and you have a lot of money that goes out up front for the product that you're selling, you have a cash gap. And you have to understand what that cash gap is. You have to understand how to use that cash gap and how to manage it so that you don't sell yourself out of business. Now you can have the other side. And people don't always understand that, right? Like you can have, if you're a business where you take money up front, right? So you get money up front and you haven't delivered the service yet. So you've got the money, but you haven't paid for the service to be delivered yet. But you go and spend that money, you're in just as big of a problem as if the guy on the other side. Because now you have to pay to have the service delivered, but you've already spent the money. I've seen it all, right? I mean, in 20 years, I've seen every kind of terrible situation you can imagine. I was talking today to this group of other people, and one of them was talking about a chiropractor that they were working with that didn't know how many of the people that paid through insurance were actually getting paid for. Now, you might think, well, how could you not know whether or not you're getting, paid for from the insurance? Well, unfortunately, it's a very complicated structure they have inside of insurance and payments, and it's real easy to not know. And this guy is like, well, this is the best part of my business. I get most of my customers through there. But I can't understand why I don't have any money. I think I know. I'll bet if we actually looked at your numbers from your insurance, we'd find out where all that money is. I had a pharmacy client that practically went out of business because they didn't know that number.
It's so critical in those particular industries. I know if you're swimming in those circles and you listen to maybe some podcasts that are specific to dental or chiropractic or pharmacy or medical adjacent, and you kind of understand like this whole insurance thing there's a lot more to it. But if you're not in those circles, like helping you all understand for a second, you have lack of pricing controls. You have lack of clear understanding of when you're going to get paid. There's a whole process to go through. There's so many things that make the business like 10 times harder than it needs to be, simply because insurance is involved. And you see it all the time when you're the patient of some big organization. Say it's a doctor's office, and the billing department and your insurance don't seem to be able to communicate effectively. And you see the breakdowns, and it's really unfortunate to see that. But it can be really difficult to run those types of businesses if you don't understand how these things all connect.
Yeah. And, just if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, well, I don't have a business that takes insurance. Okay, well, there's plenty of other places where this similar thing can come in, right? Like, I've had people who go, oh, you know what? I've got an opportunity to do some government work. And when I go, they go, well, what's the problem? I was like, well, do you understand how long it takes the government to pay? Can you front all that money for that long? And they're like, what do you mean how long it takes the government to pay? I'm like, well, you didn't do your research, did you?
Yeah, when you're working with actual fiscal budgets, and oh my gosh, we had a sewer and storm drain cleaning type of a client for a while, and they had seen some massive success, but a lot of their clients were local municipalities, governments, things of that nature. And almost always they would have a huge chunk of their revenue stuck in receivables. And we're talking, I think it was like average 90-day payment cycles minimum, if not longer in some cases. That's just what you get when you start working with
you can get the same thing working with big corporates. Yeah. If what you do is you work with a big corporation, there's multiple levels of people who have to approve the money coming out of that. That's the same sort of thing, and it can disappear on a moment's notice.
Now,
this is why we had such a big issue when the real estate crash happened. All of these people had all these contracts, some with the government, some with big, firms that were doing, huge construction projects and whatever. And it all dried up overnight. All of a sudden, all those contracts were worthless. And don't think it can't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely can happen again. But you flip it on its head for a second, and you think of specifically with the large corporations, and there's some of these layers of, we're going to call it controls for a minute. Controls before money is allowed to be, dispersed. And, if you take that from a strategy standpoint, it's kind of there's a nice little learning in here. If you're a business and need to control your payables, and ideally you continue to get a little bit larger and have a little bit more sway as you become a larger portion of some of your vendors, things like that. But doing it respectfully in the right way. But there is kind of some lessons on the opposite side of this. The controlling the cash gap isn't just about bringing money in the door, but it's understanding how and when do we allow money to go out the door. And sometimes that's these vendor contracts. Sometimes it's just who's the controller. And for many small businesses, you start thinking of, I need a CFO. I need somebody that's going to help me with strategy on finance. And really, they're going to help me with tax planning and some of the CPA level stuff. We kind of forget that maybe we should start with a controller. When do we let money actually out the door? And how tightly do we look at things on the budget of the line item? So maybe you can kind of speak to that a little bit, because I've seen some of your spreadsheets. I've seen how you take the clients through those first financial iterations of things, which is incredibly powerful. Tell us a little bit about how you manage that with clients, and kind of what that looks like to break it down in a way that doesn't fully overwhelm them, especially if they're not like us and think it's sexy to look at numbers?
Well, one of the first things that I do is I break my budgeting into, or my financial management into 3 different areas, right? One is your accounting, okay? And your accounting should be handled by somebody who understands how to do your bookkeeping and all of that kind of stuff, right? And that's just one aspect of it. Another is your financial planning going into the future, right? And a lot of times people say, well, that's my budget. And it's like, no, the budget's part of the financial, the accounting side, right? The budget is, this is what I have known, based on what I know right now, this is what I can pay, sort of thing, right? The financial plan is looking into the future and saying, this is where I want to go. What do the numbers have to look like to be able to support that? And then reviewing that on a regular basis, right? Now, that may sound like, oh my God, that's a lot of work. Well, what we do is we have it built out from the financial, from the accounting software or whatever, so that we have numbers that make sense. Then we sit down and plan it out together. And then we have an overview sheet that basically just shows basic numbers of revenue, cost of goods, expenses, other cash going out, because we have to take that into account, right? And then this is what our cash flow is looking like, right? So that we can look at it simply and easily on basically one page that we can look at and go, okay, this is what it looks like, and this is what it's going to look like going out to the end of the year. Then we have a third piece. Now, the third piece is what I like to call my crystal. The third piece is a true cash flow forecast. Now, you might have seen inside of QuickBooks a cash flow forecasting tool. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay, as a matter of fact, you cannot get this information from QuickBooks. You have to go straight into your bank and look at what is the cash coming into the bank and what's the cash going out of the bank. And I say, it's got to be done on a weekly basis. Right? Every week you're looking at what money came in, what money came out. Now you said, well, how does that become a crystal ball? Well, because you can predict what money's coming in, and you can predict what money's coming out for at least 6 to 8 weeks, typically. Right? As a matter of fact, I try to do 6 months. Now, granted, after about a month, it's pretty theoretical. But for the next month, month and a half, it's pretty accurate typically, depending on the business and how long I've been doing it. Right? Because what goes in and what goes out stays pretty accurate. And the way we use this sheet is only what we absolutely know is going to come in, or we have a really good idea of what's going to come in. Right? Because sometimes if I'm talking like a retail store, maybe we don't know for sure exactly how much is, right? But we can guess pretty close based on what came in over the last 6 weeks. Right? If that's trending up, great. If that's trending down, well, we can see that tip. And then we can actually look and see, okay, well, I know there's, these bills are coming in on these days of the month or these days of the week. And say, do I have the money in the bank to actually pay that? Now, if you've never actually worked on a close, scale on finances in the bank, you may not understand what I mean by that, but most business owners know exactly what I mean by that. Okay, payroll's coming up next week. Do I have the money in the bank to pay that payroll? Or am I going to, based on what I know is going to come in? And, just to throw in what you were saying, right? If I don't, what can I do? Right? What bills don't have to be paid at this moment? Right? Can I push that out? What's the farthest out I can push that bill payment out based on my, agreement with them, right? And if I do, am I going to get a penalty fee? Okay, great. If I have to pay a penalty fee because I can't pay it right now, then I got to add that in and take that into account that I'm going to pay a penalty. But at least I know.
I want to pause on that because I think that is such a critical piece. And there's a few things I want to highlight based on what you just said, but that ability, first and foremost, to see what decisions can I make based on what should be true. And the further, what's the best way to say it? Like the longer time scale you have in order to make those decisions, the more levers that you can pull. So if I wake up tomorrow and realize my bank account has $100 in it and payroll's 10 grand, like there's very little I can do other than just say, crap, people aren't getting paid. I got to go figure out how to make $9,900 or hope something comes in. But if I know a week out, I can make a different decision. If I know 6 weeks out, right? So you're talking the longer cash flow forecasting. If you know 6 weeks out or 4 weeks out that you're going to be under the number that you need, and it's because of a timing issue, it's something else like that. I mean, you could pull the lever on the payables, and what bills do I not have to pay, or can I push them? If I go have a conversation with a vendor 4 or 5 weeks out, they're going to be a lot more receptive in working with you than just say like, yeah, I'm just not paying that right now. And that's just one lever, right?
I didn't notice that I didn't have any money in the bank.
Yeah, yes.
Sorry about that.
It makes you look really, really good as a client of theirs. But then you look at it.
Employees love that too.
Yeah, no kidding. But I mean, you look at it and you could say, so that's one lever. Another lever that you can pull is, maybe there's just some expenses just in general that are a little inflated on the P&L right now, and we're going to temporarily cut them. It could be, everything is actually going really, 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 really well in the business, and it really is just a timing issue of things. It's going to be a 2-week gap that we need to solve. It's a one-time occurrence type situation. That's where if you've got a line of credit, you've got something else in place already, it gives you the ability to tap into those things on a short term, which is what they are meant to be there for. Or, worst case scenario, it's like, all right, I'm 4 or 6 weeks out. I know that this is going to be the issue. I got to go sell my way out of it. But now I know that I need to go sell, and I need to know how much I need to go sell, and you and the team can go work on some of these things. So it gives you a choice. And unfortunately, for those of you that have been following me for a bit and know our story, we went through that. We had to get to the point where we're like, oh, we're 4 weeks away from having to close the doors. And had to make some really hard decisions. I promise you, it is so much easier when you have a much larger runway to see how to make the decisions. But I wanted to highlight a couple other things. And the first one being the honest truth of what you know is going to come in. And I heard you say, especially in a retail situation, things like that, where sales do fluctuate a bit, it's based on what has happened. And I really wanted to highlight that for a second, because I think it'd be very easy to go, well, I think this, and I think this, and I think this, because it's summertime, and I'm going to get more. It's like, okay, great. What has actually happened? Almost nobody likes to go back and actually do that.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. It's better to underestimate in the cash flow forecast than speculate on what might happen if things are great, right? I've done that in my personal cash flow forecast. I've done that, but I've only done it as a thought exercise, right? Like, okay, well, what if I did this, this, and this? If those numbers came in here, would that make the difference that I need? And then I'll look at it and go, okay, yeah, if I could do that, that would make the difference. But I don't leave them in there. Take them back out because I need the cash flow to show me that, on this date, we go negative. And, that's got to change in the reality on the sheet, right? And Is it 100% accurate? It can't be, right? Sometimes people don't pay on time. Sometimes, the bank holds a check for longer than you thought they were or whatever, right? I mean, this happens, but at least we've got that buffer zone.
Yeah. And that really helps me highlight the other piece that I don't want to slip past the audience, and that is the weekly review. And there's two things that come to mind. The first one being directly related to what you were just mentioning is like it can't always be true. Things are going to come up, and the reality is any level of budget forecasting that you're doing should be reviewed and amended based on what's actually happening. If you had planned on, $5,000 worth of cash coming in this week and next week and the following week, and you only hit 3,000 this week and 1,000 next week, you got to change and update the forecast so that it's real moving forward. And you start seeing this, divergent of, what was originally there and what is, and that could be better or worse. But that real time updating is incredibly important. I think I heard a statistic maybe a year or two ago that it takes on average about 3 years of consistent that level of budgeting before you ever get to the point of pretty consistently hitting within 10% of budget. It just takes that much like refinement and iteration and until you kind of get it right. But the second piece on this I want to highlight is to the point of like, that sounds like a lot. Like every week I got to pull up the numbers and I got to do that. Like that sounds awful. I will tell you from personal experience, even if you don't like to do it, being able to do it on a weekly basis makes it so much easier. If you wait till the end of the month, you wait till the end of the quarter, you got to reconcile everything. It is a much, much, much bigger task if you do it that way. If you just take 5 minutes to look at it every day and take 30 to 40 minutes at the end of each week, it's so much easier.
I agree. Even inside of your accounting software, right? I use QuickBooks. Right? I keep my QuickBooks updated at the very least weekly, right? If I have the bandwidth, I'll do it daily. I also recommend that people use an accountant that's going to do the same thing, or rather a bookkeeper. You don't want to pay an accountant to be updating QuickBooks. But, if you're going to hire a bookkeeper, you want them to be doing the same thing. You don't want them to be coming in at the end of the month and trying to reconcile it, and coming to you and going, well, what was this check for? What do you mean, what was this check for? I don't remember. That was a month ago. And you'll have the same thing even if you're doing it, right? If I'm not doing it within a week of those charges, I mean, sometimes even if I wait to the end of the week, I'm looking at something that happened on Monday and going, what was that? Of course, I'm getting up there in age, but, it's still, there's a lot going on. Sometimes I've done a dozen things since then. Mm-hmm. I don't remember exactly. I have to go back and sometimes I have to go back and look at my calendar and go, what was I doing that day?
Yeah. I think the important bit of this is the function needs to be consistently done. Yes, in the beginning, I'm a personal believer that it's important for you as a business owner to take the time and like learn the process and go through building the habit. Eventually, that doesn't need to be you though. Once you know enough that you can hire that out, whether that's a bookkeeper, it's eventually an in-house person, it's a full controller plus bookkeeping team, etc. But each of these kind of functions of where you track and how do you manage things, at the end of the day, as the business owner, you want to be able to clearly see the information that allows you to make the best decisions. And those decisions could be in marketing this week. It could be in sales next week. It could be in ops one week, right? But knowing the information gives you the power and the clarity to make decisions. So at first, you got to do it, build the habit, and then we can start looking at hiring the right people. Which brings me to probably the most important piece of this particular podcast and timing. And that is here in about a month, we're going to be talking all about this topic of hiring the right people. Yeah. And hiring without regret. And we're going to be coming together. Here, was it August 6th? I'm going to be making the flight down to Miami. Doug and I are going to be getting together. We're going to be bringing some business owners together for about hour and a half, 2 hours. And we're going to be talking about this topic of hiring without regret. I'm getting pretty excited about it. How you feeling about it?
I'm psyched. I can't wait. I'm like, do we really have to wait until August to do this? And, there's a lot of planning that goes in getting it set up. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, actually. One of the things about me, anyway, and I'm pretty sure it's the same with you, Tanner, having worked with you, is I don't want to get up and do a lecture, right? That's not my style. My style is, we're going to talk and you're going to do some work. And, in the end, you're going to have done a lot more of the work than I did, just because that's how you get to know what's really so for you and what it's going to do for you.
Absolutely.
And, ultimately, you're going to leave having a real understanding of what it takes to have a team that's truly going to work for you. And I don't mean work for you in the sense of work for you. I mean work for you in the sense of they are going to be the great team that will take you and your business to the next level.
So we've got room for about 30 individuals. So if you're listening to this, if you're watching this before August 6th and you're in the Miami area, or heck, if you're not in the Miami area and want to fly in for it, make sure that you register. I'll put the link in the description below. We're only taking about 30 folks. That will fill up quickly. So make sure that you get the registration in, and come with at least one thing that you want to gain from the day. As Doug mentioned, it's a lot less of, I'm going to stand on stage and just do a presentation, and more, how do we help you take away the things that you need? My favorite thing to do is to start with writing that one thing down and then sharing it as a group, so that we as facilitators of the conversation can ensure that you get that one thing out of the day. So looking forward to it. August 6th, registration link will be in the description below. Doug, this has been a lot of fun. I cannot wait until the next Coach's Corner here in probably handful of weeks. Maybe we'll do something where we're down in Miami. Grab another conversation like this, share some insights for the audience, but appreciate you jumping on and going through some conversation and strategy with me today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.